Hello, this is Peter, and welcome to Odd Commander, a channel that I am creating focusing on all things EDH. This is an episode of Recycle, where I take incomplete cycles and try to complete them, or take unbalanced cycles and try to balance them. I've set some boundaries for myself. I can't change the core function of the cycle to whatever I want, and I have to keep the spirit of the existing cards in place. And it must be something that could be feasibly balanced as a Magic card within the context of how the original card was made. My goal is to become better at Magic card designing and to have critical discussions of the design of Magic cards. If you don't agree with my designs or don't like something that I said about them, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to hear any feedback that you have for me and would love to discuss it with you. With that out of the way, let's get into today's episode. With a new addition to the Kamigawa world on the horizon, I would like to talk about my favorite cycle from the plane, and that is the Shrine cycle. Currently, the Shrine cycle has 11 cards in it, one of which is a 5-color card that isn't part of a cycle, and the rest is part of 2 monocolored cycles. Let's take a look at these cycles, then see what we can do about adding a 3rd monocolored cycle to power up the archetype even more. Our first cycle of Shrines came out in Champions of Kamigawa, the first of the Kamigawa block, and the second cycle came out in Core Set 2021, which came with the Sanctum of All card to tie them all together. The familiar theme between the Shrines is that they're all legendary enchantments with the unique subtype of Shrine that have abilities that care about how many shrines you control. Our first cycle only had abilities that trigger on the upkeep, but the second cycle featured a wider variety with 3 cards that trigger at the pre-combat main phase and 2 cards that have activated abilities that care about the shrines. Another note is that shrines work well with many other shrines, meaning that if you build a deck around these shrines, we're imagining that you're going to have a lot of shrines on the battlefield, and most likely you're not spending those resources to put creatures on the battlefield, unless they're enchantress help effects. So most likely you aren't going to be swinging a lot and you're going to have a lot of enchantments. So moving on to the design, if we're going to make unique abilities for these new shrines, let's take a look at what the old ones gave us. In all of the colors we get 2 cards. Let's start with white. White gave us a life gain ability and an activated ability that taps down creatures. Blue gave us 2 different card draw abilities. One just straight draws us cards. The other one draws us cards and allows us to discard a card. Black gives us a brutal opponent discard ability and a draining ability. Red gives us 2 different burn abilities. One is an upkeep trigger and the other one is an activated ability. And green gives us a token generator and a mana producing ability. So after all that, it seems like there's no more that we could possibly add, but let's see what we can do. The design space is open for lots of different possibilities for these shrines. A little bit of a design note for this is that I've gone with the tradition of giving all of these the same start to their name. The first block had Honden, the second block had Sanctum, so I wanted to use a similar name, and this time it's going to be Reliquary as the title. You're probably familiar with Reliquary Tower. It's a familiar staple in EDH, but I think it's a good way to encapsulate the more aggressive and progressive nature of the shrines that I have designed, while still keeping the idea of a shrine in place. Let's get started with white. White already gave us life gain and tapping down, which are 2 abilities that are already pretty synonymous with white. White also supports creatures really well, which doesn't bode well in a shrine deck, as I mentioned earlier, where there aren't going to be a lot of creatures without dependence on another shrine that would make the creatures. But let's just go with it. I think we can explore an area where shrines support a more creature-oriented deck with shrine support. It's going to be a little bit weaker just from the nature of the deck construction, but it will get really strong when we have the right shrines out on the battlefield, which is really what Sanctum of All and the shrine decks are all trying to do. So let's read Reliquary of Glorious Past. It costs 2 and a white. It's, as always, a legendary enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the number of shrines you control. This will be an all-star in finishing out the game if we have a ton of shrines and just 1 or 2 creatures, putting our eggs on one basket and hopefully swinging through, maybe utilizing some other enchantments that take advantage of the Exalted mechanic to kind of create a Voltron feel with maybe even just our commander. This is a really good support towards that. Next, let's go to blue. Blue's draw effects are already really good in some of the best shrines that we can tutor up for. So I think it needs a powered down version really desperately. So I'm just gonna go with this. Reliquary of Eternal Wisdom. It costs a blue mana, and it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, scry X, where X is the number of shrines you control. Pretty straightforward, just lets you scry, and it gets better and better with every shrine you get, like all of these shrines. Works really well with the other blue shrines because you can kind of stack it together so that you scry and then draw for the Sanctum of Calm Waters. All right, next up is black, which was really actually pretty difficult for me. Black already has discard, which is really brutal, and a drain ability, which is also really brutal. I've almost won games just solely off of that drain ability. So how do we top that? Let's go with something else that black is really good at, and adding on to our creature support theme, let's go with reanimation. So we have Reliquary of Unbridled Rebirth. That's 4 and a black for at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, return target creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of shrines you control. I think, going on the theme of supporting creatures like we had with the white shrine, this is actually kind of a wild card in the cycle. On the one hand, this effect is really powerful with a lot of shrines on the battlefield. But on the other hand, again, you're not playing a deck with a lot of creatures, most likely. And unless you've planned for this, most likely what you're going to be reanimating are support pieces. So it's possible that this shrine just sits there literally gathering dust. I think that's okay in the end. It's a shrine contributing to the overall shrine count, and in the right situation, it can be useful for you. Not all of these shrines have to be totally overpowered. This one can just be okay. Now for red. Can we get away from the burn theme? I mean, I love that the other ones just do direct damage, but I feel like in Commander, we want a little bit more, so let's do this. Reliquary of Molten Insight. It's 5 and a red, one of our most expensive shrines. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of shrines you control. You may play those cards until end of turn. I've liked this trend that we're seeing of using exile effects to get card advantage, and that's something that I'll probably be using a lot in these designs. I think that's exactly what these shrines need. This is going to be different than the card draw effect, and frankly a little bit stronger, but it's also going to give a drawback that too much power might ruin you by exiling the cards that you're not able to cast yet, or getting rid of valuable shrines. I added the you may clause in there just because if your shrine count is too much, you're not going to want to punish yourself for having a lot of shrines by exiling too much on the top and just ruining yourself. So I'd be interested to see if the higher mana value even makes a difference in the world of Sanctum of All. We'll have to see if it playtests well. And finally, we have green. Green's mana and token effects are already really good. And again, alongside the blue, these are some of the best advantage engines that we already have. I almost always go for the token generator whenever I play with the shrines. Let's toy around with another idea, one that is, again, creature-based and supporting that synergy that we're trying to build with the white and black shrine. But it can also help us explore an avenue that green hasn't explored yet with these shrines. And that is going to be Reliquary of Bountiful Rebirth. It costs 3 and a green, and it has an activated ability that costs 8. Target enchantment you control becomes a creature with base power and toughness XX, in addition to its other types until end of turn, where X is equal to its mana value. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each shrine you control. This is a powerful way to have your cake and eat it too, by making your shrines into creatures that are weapons. Now, this carries some risk, of course, because creatures are easier to remove than enchantments. I think giving the shrines indestructible hexproof with this giving some extra protection would absolutely be too powerful for the deck. So I'll leave it up to the deck builder, whoever puts this in their deck, to use it as they will. and have whatever protection they need to make sure their shrines don't all perish very quickly. I also like the idea that if you have enough shrines on the battlefield, this is just a free effect, which can be good for overrunning the board, but can also make you susceptible to board wipes, and it's a pretty high bar to cross to have 8 shrines on the battlefield. And that's it for this episode of Recycle. What do you all think? Do you like these new additions? Do you think they bring exciting and balanced gameplay, or would you have designed them differently? Any feedback would be appreciated, and discussion is encouraged. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and also let me know if you have any other cycles that you can think of that are unbalanced or you hate to see unfinished and you want to see someone finish them. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time.